Hi, and welcome to this series. I'm Doug Gilbertson. In better times, I was president of a place here in Toronto called Clumbilonga. It, along with most other tango establishments here in Toronto, have been closed for over a year because of the pandemic that's still going on. It's starting to look like there might be a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. They're getting better with vaccinations. And so it's looking as if there's a possibility places might be able to start opening a little bit again this year, possibly with another shutdown during the winter when the next wave comes. We'll have to see when that happens. But then things might start getting better next year. In the meantime, it's been very tough on people who are into dance. A lot of the dance establishments have been forced to close by the government for good reason. And if you are interested in dance and trying to pick it up on your own, some people have partners that they are living with, and so they have somebody to practice with, and some people don't, which can be awkward for them because a lot of things in tango require some kind of guidance or somebody to work with to be able to pick them up. Now, there are some very good instructors around who are providing lessons and coaching and stuff online, sometimes by Zoom and these sorts of things. A lot of them that I've seen tend to be geared towards people who are in couples, and so they have someone to work with because they tend to cover a lot of steps. What we think of as steps, actual set sequences of things. And in tango especially, there's a lot of working with the leading and following with a partner, which is very important. But if you're on your own and you don't have a lot of background to start with, these sorts of things are going to be hard for you to pick up anything really from. And so in this series, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take it in terms of a beginner's level, the things you need to know to be able to get into dance. But it's from a couple of assumptions. One is I'm assuming that you're on your own, and so you don't have a partner to work with. And so there are things you can do on your own to get yourself to be looking more like a dancer and moving more like a dancer. There are certain things you won't be able to do. And so you're on your own and you're starting off, meaning you don't necessarily have a lot of background to start with, especially not in tango. If you have background in another dance like ballroom or salsa or something like this, you may be surprised how much you actually know already from your other dances. Tango looks a lot different, but there are some things which actually transfer a surprising amount once you really realize how it ties together. Okay? And so I'm assuming you're basically someone who's just starting off, and you're on your own, and you're trying to build an interest of yours in tango, and so we're trying to give you something to give you a start in tango, and so that later on, when you can get out to classes and stuff, you'll have an easier time picking up what they're teaching, and you'll maybe even have an easier time getting people in your class who are willing to try things out with you because you seem to be moving okay, like a dancer. You're not obviously someone who is untrainable, for instance. So this is where I'm coming from. And a lot of the guidance I'm getting my ideas from comes from a time in Argentina before the 1950s when there weren't a lot of classes teaching tango in Buenos Aires. And so you normally had to practice and pick things up on your own, which is more or less the same situation we're in now. In those days, what they would do is they would pick up things from their friends and family, maybe their moms and dads, or maybe an older brother knows a bit so he can show them something. You might have a neighbor who's into it, and so you can pick up a little bit from them. These sorts of places. For the men in particular, they would sometimes have groups of guys that would get together once in a while to practice in a set spot, and if you showed up enough that they figured you were interested, they would start showing you how to start dancing a little bit with the guys. Starting off by following, you would be dancing as a follower. with somebody else leading you. And after 2 or 3 or 4 months of that, if you started doing all right, somebody might start teaching you how to do some leading. And then after a couple of years of that, one of the senior guys might look at you and say, well, you got potential. And so he'll invite you along to one of the milongas. And the problem with the milongas was their attitude was generally, if you can't dance, why are you here? You were expected to already know how to dance when you got there. And so you had to convince these people that you could dance, because if they hadn't seen you before and they didn't know if you could dance, they didn't want to touch you. And so this fellow who had invited you along would talk to one of the people he knew and say, I brought along this fella, he's new, but he seems to be pretty good. Could you please get him for a dance as a favor to me and tell me what you think? And so this would be his very first dance in the milongas. It would be totally arranged. If he did okay, all the other people in the milonga could see, yes, this guy can dance, and so all of a sudden they become open to dancing with him. And if he had trouble, then it was back to the boys-only session to practice for another couple of months until he was cleared up enough that he could try again. And this is the way it was learned back in those days. And so we're going to take a bit of that approach right now. And one feature of that approach is it didn't concentrate on doing set steps. You didn't have a fixed basic. They didn't do that. You didn't have sequences like that. Okay, they didn't teach that. What they taught was how to dance. And when you went to the milongas, you didn't have to do a lot of flashy stuff. Most of the time, you didn't have room to do that sort of stuff anyway. Even now, in Argentina, if you start taking a back step, all of a sudden someone is going to pick up the microphone and start saying to everybody, there's a guy over in that corner who's taking back steps. Be careful around him, because it's a dangerous thing. All right, so a lot of this flashy stuff you want to be careful of anyway. If you start learning these types of steps, then these are the sorts of things you're going to be forgetting and mucking up and all the rest of it. What we're going to focus on here are a specific set of skills that you need, which are underlying all those other things that you can do. It's not going to be totally comprehensive. There's a lot of details I'm going to gloss over for the sake of getting at the specific things you really need to know to get started. All right. It's not going to make you a king and queen of the dance floor. There's a whole extra learning curve that you're going to have as soon as you start having a partner involved. Okay. But I'll be giving you some of the little underpinnings where you can start preparing yourself to be able to handle this stuff, and when you get to class you can pick things up a lot quicker. When you get out to places where they dance tango, you can look as if you know a bit about tango. You might be able to get someone to dance with you and pick up a lot that way. In my early days, I picked up a lot from just being able to dance with people who are better than me, because they tolerated me because I seemed to know what I was doing. And so hopefully we'll get you to that point. So each of the lessons in this one are going to be fairly specific. It's going to have nothing to do with a set step. It's going to be a specific concept, because if you try and learn steps, you will forget steps. But as soon as you know the concepts, you will start finding your own ways of using those concepts. And I'll be including a little demo dance, which is just me dancing around right here. You can see I don't have a lot of space here, so you don't need a lot of space to do it either. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time teaching that stuff, but it's going to be some examples of things that you should be able to pick up for yourself without a lot of hassle once you understand and are able to do the one concept that I am teaching in that lesson. So with that, let's get started.